So in this section, we'll provide a bit of background to the STEP code, in particular the changes that were made in May of 2023. Just a reminder that while the BC Building Code applies to all buildings, this presentation is focused on Part 3, which is really larger and more complex buildings. So it includes everything from offices to apartments, institutions, retail, etc. There are BC STEP code requirements and sister checklist and presentation for Part 9. So if you're looking for that information, you can go to energystepcode.ca and download that there. Just to remind everyone a little bit of a timeline on the STEP code, it was first introduced in April of 2017. And since there have been several revisions, the most recent of which was on May 1st of 2023. That was the fourth revision to the STEP code, and it occurred under BC 2018 revision number 5. So there's 3 key changes that occurred in that revision, and those are the ones we want to outline next. The first major change was the introduction of the zero carbon STEP code. So this is in section 10.3, which is called greenhouse gas emissions, and you'll see us use the GHG abbreviation a lot. This section introduced GHGI, or greenhouse gas intensity limits, using new emissions factors in the BC Building Code. There are 4 different emissions level, which we've shown down here. EL1 is the most straightforward. It's just asking buildings to report the emissions. And then those step up to EL4, which is intended to be essentially a net zero emissions building. For the time being, the zero carbon STEP code is open for voluntary adoption by local governments, or you may see us refer to them as authorities having jurisdiction, or AHJs. The second major change was that Step 1 was removed from the STEP code. Now, Step 1 was using an NECB, or National Energy Code for Buildings 2015 model, and also required air tightness testing. This has been replaced with Step 2, and that requires NECB 2020, and again, continues the requirement for air tightness testing. So really, the major change that we've seen in this revision is upgrading from NECB 2015 to NECB 2020. Now, one thing you'll notice is that in the checklist itself, we use Step 2 with NECB in brackets to refer to this requirement. And the distinction there is that we want to differentiate from Step 2 requirements that have TEDI and TUI limits. So this removal of Step 1 and upgrade to Step 2 NECB applies to any reference buildings and mixed-use projects. So for example, if you had a warehouse and office building that had both occupancies, the office building has TEDI and TUI limits, it would be under the STEP code occupancy, but the warehouse does not. So it would require a reference model using NECB 2020 as required in this part of the STEP code. And then there are also some A2, B2, and B3 major occupancies that we loosely refer to as public sector buildings that are required to comply under this Step 2 with NECB 2020 and air tightness testing. So we've grouped those below as schools, colleges, libraries, rec centers, hospitals, and care facilities. The third major change under the STEP code is that for group C, D, E major occupancy classifications, STEP code is now required. It's no longer just a voluntary level above base building code compliance. So what that means is NECB and ASHRAE prescriptive and trade-off paths can no longer be used for those classifications, which are hotels and motels, other residential buildings, offices, or business and personal services mercantile. Now, the reason we've noted that as steps 2 to 4 are now mandatory is because Step 2 will be the minimum requirement across the province, but some jurisdictions may have already adopted a higher step for some of those classifications, in which case, of course, the higher step would govern if the jurisdiction requires it.